Hello, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Arena, which is episode 18 of season 1 of Star Trek the Original Series. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my user polls. The episode to win my user poll that was exclusively for Star Trek the Original Series is Arena. So Arena is the episode where Kirk goes to a Federation colony on Cestus 3 to find that it was completely destroyed by an alien attack with only one survivor. Kirk manages to fend back the alien attack, but then chases the ship with the intent of destroying it to not let it get away, but they are stopped by a superior alien species called the Metrons that take the captain of the alien ship, which they identify as Gorn, and Kirk, and put him on a planet and force him to fight to the death. The winner will be able to go on his merry way, and the loser will have their ship destroyed. And Kirk ends up winning the fight through some ingenuity, and then he shows mercy on the Gorn and lets them leave alive. So this is quite a classic episode. I don't know. I don't know if it's considered the best or one of the best. I mean, I've heard some people put it in their top 10. I wouldn't say it's typically always in the top 10, but it's certainly a noteworthy, memorable episode. There are some people, like my brother, who don't like this episode at all, think it's a bit cheesy, and it is partly known for the cheese factor. Some people do know it as a fun watch to sit there and laugh and make fun of how silly it looks, because the Gorn, of course, is one of the more outdated episodes of the original series, shall we say, because the Gorn, of course, was this silly lizard costume, which looks like, me and my brother used to describe it as a college mascot from like a football team or something, and it looks very cheesy, and someone could like put together a costume just on their own personal spare time to wear at a convention that would be just as good or better, to be honest. So it's a bit hard to take it seriously. Now, some people though remember for the iconic, it is a very, like most original series episodes, has a very simplistic plot and is a very simple premise that Kirk and this alien captain are forced to fight to the death on the planet. So a lot of people know it for that, and I don't know, like, I never had an issue with this episode myself. Like, I did kind of like it. I thought it was kind of cool, but I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite original series episodes because it is a bit simplistic. I think when I did my top 10 original series episode, I got a couple comments like, "Where's Arena?" And I'm like, yeah, I don't think Arena belongs in my top 10, to be perfectly honest, but it's not, but I don't think the way my brother does. I don't think it's a terrible episode. I don't think it's a bad episode. I think it's fine. I mean, there are definitely some plot holes in it, but it is interesting, like, when you allow for the fact that it is the original series and is a bit outdated and a bit simplistic, is that when Kirk arrives on his Federation colony, he thinks all is well, like he's going to beam down to, like he's invited, gets this message from like the old friend he knows, like, "Oh, come on down for dinner," and you see them at the start of the episode, he's talking to McCoy, it's like, "Oh, he makes a mean roast," or whatever, and they're all just preparing to relax, and they beam down to ruined, to a colony that's completely destroyed where everyone's dead, and then they get attacked under fire by all these bombs that are dropping, and so it's really was a really intense scene, and particularly, and of course you had this is the original series, you have to have a classic red shirt death where they have the security officer in the red shirt. Kirk is like, "Oh, go take a look." It's like, he's like, "Okay, Captain, what is this?" And then he's dead. Like, yeah, it's a bit cheesy, and usually I really hate the red shirt that trope. It does really bother me. But in this situation, like, it was a battle situation. You don't really expect them to just stop what they're doing and, oh no, the red shirt's dead. But still, like, it is kind of disturbing that they never even mentioned his death, and I guess it's kind of overshadowed by the death of the colony. But still, it's just like, oh yeah, who cares? Stupid red shirt died. Whatever. It happens all the time. And I just remembering for John Locke from Lost saying that Kirk sounded like a piss poor captain. Everyone always dies on his missions. But anyway, I did like the scene. It was pretty intense, where they were under like constant bombardment. And it's one of the few episodes that did seem, especially of the original series, that had this on the ground rather than just ship to ship battle like Balance of Terror or whatnot. But this is one of the few cases where we see. And a lot of times the on the planet battles have to do with like usually primitive weapons, because they're trying to make it more like a western, and so they have these Native American equivalents shooting with bows and arrows or whatever, these monsters in horribly looking, again, college mask-esque costumes throwing arrows going roar. So this is one case where it actually felt like a war situation, where there was bombardment from like bombs dropping on their heads, and Kirk had to get like this funny little grenade type weapons that was like these blue balls, and they never really touched on this more in Star Trek in the future, but he loaded it up in this like cannon type thing, and the security officer, for some reason, this one was wearing blue, which made no sense to me, but whatever. Maybe this is before they got the color scheme going, because this is only halfway through season 1. But anyway, he was saying that, wow, that's a bit close for one of those jewels, Captain. And he was like, well, then everyone took cover, so Kirk put it in to launch it. Everyone like found cover and ducked, because apparently it was quite powerful, and the effect of it felt more like it was just the original series special effects, where it was just a bright color flash and the like transporter sound of effect. I guess it's their equivalent of photon torpedoes, because that's kind of the effects they used in the original series for that as well, which is very not good. It's just like whatever. So can only imagine what it would have looked like if they did proper effects. But then apparently, like, the Gorn retreated after that attack, so apparently those things were quite powerful. So I was a bit disappointed they were never really mentioned in lore again. But anyway, like, they didn't even know that they were the Gorn. They didn't mention them by name, of course, until they met the Metrons, and we didn't actually see them on Cetrus 3, which, I gotta say, I watched a video recently where the person was talking about the Vasquez Rocks, where they filmed Arena, and mentioned Cetrus 3, but this is not where they filmed Cetrus 3. It's where they filmed the planet, where the Metrons were caught. And then a shitload of people were pointing this out in the comment section, and they came in and he was like, yes, I know the distinction, but they still filmed Cetrus 3 with Vasquez Rocks, and I don't think they did. You didn't see the Vasquez Rocks? Maybe it was that same general area, and they filmed them both in the same general area, but you didn't see the iconic location. If you don't know this is a location, they've actually filmed a lot of episodes, Star Trek episodes, in the original series and Next Generation. I think Next Generation visited for episodes like Who Watches the Watchers. In the original series, there's a whole bunch of other episodes like The Alternative Factor, and I don't know, a few other episodes filmed. So it became kind of, I don't know, I think I've heard of tourists going there because it became this sort of iconic situation associated, location associated with Star Trek. And apparently they filmed for the new Picard show there as well. So, but it's not Cessus 3, because that's not where they filmed Cessus 3. It was the planet where, anyway, off topic. So, Kirk goes and has this bloodlust of wanting to go after, chase the Gorn, and it does seem a bit anti-Star Trek feel that Kirk is like, he doesn't want to go talk or negotiate, he wants to destroy the ship. You can't really imagine Picard wanting to do that. It seems kind of against the principles of Starfleet and the Federation. And what's also interesting, because again, this is early days for Star Trek, and I've recently read something about how the original series in particular was, each episode was written by entirely different writings. It wasn't like the situation where you think of a writing room in present day TV where you have writers sitting down discussing every idea, even those submitted from outside sources. So you had that sense of continuity in the writers' room, where you had the same people who were at least editing and looking over every single episode. But that wasn't the case in the original series. Apparently, the writers were a lot more isolated from one another, which is why you have so wildly inconsistent world building in the original series, particularly in the first season where things were still new, and so you hadn't really gotten that feel that high morals of the Federation. And the fact, it's kind of funny because Spock even brings up, well, what about respect for sentient life? And Kirk is like, blah, 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 whatever. And he kind of like chastises Spock for even bringing it up. And he was like, I'm the captain, you're going to follow my rules. And Spock's like, of course, Captain. It's like, good, I'm glad you understand. It's like being a smart ass about it. Oh, excuse me, Kirk, that Spock actually respects sentient life. I thought that's what the whole fucking deal with the Federation was about. And you could argue in modern times, or Next Generation times, once the feel of Starfleet and Star Trek has been established, that they probably would have relieved Kirk from duty because he actively just didn't give a fuck and wanted to destroy. He said it was to discourage this alien from attacking us. Like, we have to destroy the ship, otherwise they'll just feel like they can invade our space with impunity. Which I don't really agree with his reasoning there. I think it would only encourage more of their species to attack because they destroyed one of their ships. They would feel more justified. You destroyed one of our ships, so we're in the wrong. It would give them the excuse to just ignore the fact that they destroyed a colony and then commit to a full-on war. So, but why? It's quite obvious why Kirk has his attitudes, because of the plot. And this is what the plot required. It required him to have this bloodlust, so then they can have this stupid resolution at the end of the episode where the Metrons get in their high horse and they judge Kirk for being a primitive, and then Kirk goes through a character development where he's like, you know what? I'm not going to kill him. They were just defending themselves. What do we know? And it's all very contrived. So this whole journey is very contrived because you shouldn't have that bloodlust in the first place, and his sudden change to being like, oh, now here's the other thing. I don't like the Metrons. They appear, it's like, because the theme is arena, so it makes you think of like Colosseums or whatever, where they have people fight to the death, and then when the Metrons appear, they appear Roman in appearance. So it's obviously more of a evoking the whole feel of a Roman Colosseum type thing, which is a bit silly. So they mention, like Spock mentions, that the solar system is actually quite far, where the Metrons lived, and that they were moving away from it when they were chasing the Gorn. And when the Metrons actually seized both their ships and made them come to a stop, Spock noted that it was actually, he was surprised, and people on the bridge were surprised that the solar system was able to do that because it was so far away. So what are the Metrons' motivations here? Why did they decide to seize these two vessels when they were moving away from their space? And they said, and they came in on their high horse and like, oh, you're primitive, you're trying to kill each other, and they said the most illogical thing when Kirk was like, how dare you interfere with our normal functions. They were like, it is you who are interfering. No, they're not interfering. They're going away from you. They just happen to pass by you at a distance. What the fuck are they interfering with? They're not interfering with jack shit. You're interfering, and so your resolution to the fact that these two ships are out there chasing each other is to grab them, make them stop, make their captains fight to the death on the planet, and then promise to destroy the ship of the loser. I fail to see how that's any better than leaving them alone. In fact, I would actually think it's worse than leaving them alone, because if you left them alone, maybe the Gorn would have got away and there would have never been a conflict. Or maybe they would have actually been able to work it out and negotiate. Or maybe they would, neither ship, or maybe one ship would just get injured and retreat and leave the other ship alone. You don't know. You don't know what would happen. But if you put them both on the captains on the planet and make them fight to the death and promise to destroy the loser, then you are guaranteeing that more people are going to die. You're guaranteeing that one ship will be destroyed, when the chances aren't actually that. You don't know, if you left them alone, whether or not a ship would be destroyed or if it would lead to further contact. Now, it just so happens, of course, because of the contrivance of the episode, that Kirk, shows mercy. No, I won't kill you, which is a trope often used in TV, where the hero refuses to kill their enemy because they're all high and mighty. And I have high morals because I'm the hero, which is a trope I really hate, by the way, but I don't mind it so much here. It kind of makes sense here. Well, it's a bit contrived, obviously, but it does make sense more. I think there's more modern examples that this annoys me a lot more, where it feels a lot more like hamstrung in, like it doesn't really belong there. It just have to show how high a class and high morals this hero is, where sometimes it's actively the wrong decision too, by the way. But anyway, but I don't mind that so much here. But we had to get it to a very contrived place in order to get there. And how did the Metrons generally seem surprised that Kirk had that attitude. So you can't tell me, oh no, the Metrons did this whole arena thing because they knew it would lead to them realizing that they can be on their high horse and not having to fight and start to be like to show mercy. I would say that is definitely not the case. The Metrons, as I said, were actively surprised by Kirk's attitude. And the whole... Alright, let me get into a few more details. So first of all, let's start with let me go back to the beginning, where Kirk was summoned to the Cessus 3. And get these communication to beam down. He thinks he's beaming down to have dinner or whatever, and he beams down and finds that he's in a war zone, and everyone except for one person is dead. Why didn't the sensors detect this? Now, I know the true answer to that is that this is an earlier episode of the original series, and they probably hadn't established things like sensors, but it kind of makes sense if you beam down that you would know. You would need sensor readings to know where you're beaming down to. But again, this is kind of feeding this all into what Star Trek will eventually become. As I said, at this early stage, and every writer was also separated from one another. It's probably something but looking back on it in retrospect, this is a huge flaw that they would definitely be able to tell that the colony was destroyed before they actually physically beamed down there. I mean, that is a bit silly. The other thing is Cessus 3 is that this was mentioned in Deep Space Nine. If you recall, this is Cassie Yates, when she was dating Siska, talked about how she had, I think it was a brother who lived on Cessus 3 and was involved in the baseball. There was an actual baseball league, and which was apparently, not on Earth. They didn't play baseball commonly, and so Siska was surprised. It's like, oh, there's actually a baseball team. Oh, but it's all the way in Cessus 3, and I think they described it as being 3 months' journey from Deep Space Nine, which was quite far away. But that is interesting. But it's funny because I guess that means that the Gorn either let the Federation have Cessus 3, because in this episode the Gorn said, you're in our space, which is why we attacked your colony. But I suppose, there was a lot of non-canon material to suggest that the Federation and the Gorn has since hammered out a peace treaty and are now have sort of peaceful relations. I think the Gorn might have been name-dropped in Next Generation a couple times. I can't remember. I know that the Tholians were definitely name-dropped, because the Tholians and the Gorn are two species who a lot of people talk about, and a lot of people, they are treated like established staples of the Star Trek franchise, but each one had only appeared in one episode of the original series. And although they were name dropped a lot of times, neither one of them appeared again until Enterprise, but particularly the Mirror Universe episode, because Enterprise couldn't meet the Gorn because that would fuck with canon, because this episode clearly establishes the first time Starfleet encountered the Gorn, so they couldn't encounter the Gorn before unless they wanted to do this stupid bullshit like they did with the Ferengi, which really pissed me off, so I'm glad they didn't do that. So they had the Mirror Universe is where they met the Gorn, where of course you had the early 2000s CGI, which looks very cheesy by modern standards, but is still like a huge improvement over the college mascot appearance of the Gorn in this episode. Anyway, yeah, so it's funny, I was reading up on this episode online, and apparently Mythbusters, I never really watched, I think I watched a couple of segments from this show, but it wasn't really my thing, but apparently Mythbusters did an episode or a segment about the cannon, the diamond cannon that Kirk puts together in this episode to kill the Gorn, because I always found this a bit silly, because the Metrons apparently said, oh, you will have the necessary weapons, and the Gorn obviously was like much stronger. It was shown like Kirk takes this old rock and throws it at the Gorn and hits a square in the chest and just bounces back like it's nothing, and then it picks up this giant boulder and just throws it at Kirk. So obviously Gorn are shown as much stronger than humans. So it seems like a bit of an unbalanced battle, but of course they say that it is battle because Kirk uses his brains, his smarts, to find all these minerals on the ground to create gunpowder and put diamonds, form a little rocket thingy and primitive, and put diamonds in it and blast it out and kill the Gorn. So the Mythbusters did an episode where they tried to recreate this using the exact same minerals and materials that are mentioned in this episode to create their own mini rocket, and they found that it doesn't work. So they called bullshit on this one and said it was impractical. But, the very nerd defense of this is saying, well, maybe there is some special alien type of wood on this planet that allows this kind of weapon to work. If you want to get all nerdy about it, you can say that. Well, it's aliens that did it. But yeah, I don't know. That whole segment did seem a bit silly to me in the first place, and as I said, like the Metron's motivation for this fight, it seemed very off anyway. And also, like the whole time when they're on the planet, Kirk is like talking to this thing like it's a captain's log. He's so obsessed with captain's logs, and while he's talking the whole time, the Gorn captain can hear him, and the device translates it so the Gorn captain can understand him. And that seems a bit silly. Like, why did the Metrons give these devices, and why did Kirk just assume it was just a recorder, like a captain's log, when it was actually like a communicator? And so this whole time he was giving away his position and what he was up to. I don't know. But then let's get into this whole thing about how, and this is the thing that my brother was particularly hung up on, is how they try to present the Gorn as if, they're kind of the victims, because the Gorn captain says, well, you are invaders, you are in our space, you violated our territory, and so we destroy invaders, like they were just defending themselves. And McCoy and the ship was like, oh, is this true? Maybe we were in the wrong, maybe it's our fault because we invaded their space. But yeah, even that's true, that doesn't justify destroying a colony full of men, women, and children, killing everyone in a most violent way there, leaving only one survivor, and then planting a call to the Enterprise to lure the Enterprise to that planet with this fake call, which how they were able to fake whoever the governor or whoever lived on says, they were able to replicate his voice and fake it so precisely. I don't know, but they managed to fake the call to lure the Enterprise there so they could destroy it. That's not justified by it being in their space. They could have sent out a warning. They could have sent out the message. They could have tried to negotiate it. They could have, a warning at the very least. They could have showed up at the planet and be like, "Hey, this is not your space. This is our space. Fuck off, or we'll destroy your colony." I mean, that would still be seen as a hostile act, but at the very least, they would allow, the Federation colonists to leave and not be all killed. So, no, that their actions were not at all justified. And so, again, I would blame this on clumsy writing, and this is early days of Star Trek. Whereas in more present times, they would be able to do the story justice. Like I know what they were trying to do, because there's a lot of books, and even like later in the original series, you had the episode Devil in the Dark, where they was trying to present it where you think there's this alien monster threat, but you actually find out that it was you who were in the wrong, that you were doing something to hurt them. And there's books, and there's later Next Generation Deep Space Nine episodes that are kind of like this, where, I don't know, Deep Space Nine ever did, but Next Generation surely, where they realized that it was a misunderstanding, or it was their own, humans' own ignorance over what they were doing, because they weren't aware of this alien species. Like Next Generation had the episode Home Soil, because they didn't even realize these things were a life form. And I think Voyager did something like this too. So something like that makes a lot more sense, and I think that is what they were going for. They just did a very shitty job at doing it, because the actual situation that they presented, the Gorn weren't at all justified for destroying the outpost. They were still completely in the wrong, even if you say, Starfleet was ignorant and invaded their space. So this is a sloppy execution of that particular storyline of what they were going for. But again, it is early times for Star Trek. I did read that apparently this was the first episode that they mentioned the Federation in Star Trek, but the first time the proper title, the United Federation of Planets, won't be mentioned until A Taste of Armageddon. Because I know some people might be like, "No, you're wrong, Mark. They didn't mention that until A Taste of Armageddon." Well, A Taste of Armageddon was when they mentioned United Federation of Planets. But apparently in this episode they did mention the Federation. That's just what I read. But anyway, so I did read that this episode it's kind of funny, because apparently it was written by the Star Trek writer. He wrote the episode, but then found out there was a short story in sci-fi, published in sci-fi magazines, that was so similar to this one. In fact, that short story was called Arena. So it was so similar that they felt the need to ask permission from the person who wrote the short story. And the person who wrote the short story, of course, is very honored that Star Trek wanted to use the story, and he was very happy about it, and he very willingly let them use it. But he wasn't aware of the fact that they didn't base the story off of his story. They had actually written it independently, but found out it was so similar. The story, I guess to avoid a lawsuit, they wanted to make sure get his permission to use it. Which is kind of funny that stuff like that happens. You kind of figured that happens in some of these copyright cases you hear, like this whole debacle with Discovery and the Tardigrades video game, and then there was a thing about Stranger Things as well, where someone claimed that the Duffer Brothers stole their idea because it was too similar. But you do have to wonder, since especially in modern times when there's so much story and so much media that almost every idea has been used. You do have to wonder that if you don't get cases like this one, where it's just happens to be a coincidence, someone comes up with an idea and then they find out later on that someone else already did something that was pretty much exactly the same. I think that is kind of funny that happened here. Although, and I heard that there was actually an Outer Limits episode that was really similar, like the original Outer Limits, of course, that was really similar to this one. But this story in particular is rather simplistic, though. It is a very simple idea. You got two aliens forced to fight to the death in this arena type thing, so whatever. Anyway, my rating for Arena out of 10 is a 7, very good. It's a decent episode. I enjoy it. I get it. And, it is a bit silly. The fight choreography looks like it's what you see on the behind the scenes of people rehearsing fight choreography, where the Gorn's just like, ugh, like he moves so slow. It's like, ugh, and Kirk goes like, ugh. It's like very slow. It's like, okay, it's good to see the rehearsal. Now you guys need to do the actual fight where it looks realistic and not like you're just sparring. But whatever. It's a fun episode. I will get that, and I do see why some people do like it on a very basic level, that to see Kirk having to fight the Gorn, like Siska even mentioned on Deep Space Nine in the episode Trials and Tribulations. It's like, oh, I want to ask Kirk about fighting the Gorn on Cestus 3, which again, he didn't actually fight. Well, I guess they had that bombardment battle on Cestus 3, but the actual battle was not on Cestus 3, it was on the Metron planet. Everyone gets this wrong. But anyway, yeah, so I can understand why some people would really enjoy this, but it does have a lot of flaws, so I can see why some people wouldn't like it at all. There are a lot of, like, it did very sloppily execute the whole story of, oh, maybe we're in the wrong and we instigated this battle, which actually isn't the case in this particular episode. And the Metrons' whole motivation for being on their high horse and saying they're all advanced but still forcing two people to fight to the death and destroying the ship of the loser, they're not so much on their high horse, are they? They don't seem very morally superior to me. But anyway, still a fun episode. Still like a classic example of the original series, trying to have their own model. Kirk is like, no, I won't kill you. So it's fun original series. Anyway, that is it for my review of Arena. I will be back with more Star Trek episode reviews, so be sure to check out my channel for that, as well as many more videos I do on other shows like Lost, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.